Hello and welcome back to another breaking news update. My name is Jimmy Boyd, and you are watching Boyd News. I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. I have some breaking news coming out here for you. So, we're going to be talking about NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg, and he was recently in an interview just today talking about the whole Ukraine war and the potential outcomes of everything. And we know the majority of the landscape of what's going on here with Ukraine. Obviously, Ukraine has no funding right now, very little, if anything. There's a 60 billion aid package held up in Congress, and Ukraine is in a tough spot, right? And they have been for some time. So we have NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg coming out in this interview. And is he potentially admitting that Ukraine could be defeated here in Russia, that they may have to potentially surrender and maybe cede some territory to Russia? I talked about this a little bit yesterday, or the day before. Actually, it was during a video talking about Ukraine, and I have a X post we're gonna talk a little bit about. I discussed it already, but we'll bring it up again just in reference here. But during this interview, NATO Secretary General, he stated that Ukraine will have to decide which compromises it is ready to accept in the war with the Russian Federation. So he did talk about the fact that Ukraine obviously needs military support right now, and it's critically important to enable Ukraine to repel Russian forces at this time. But he also suggested that Ukraine might have to make concessions here. And by that meaning, what are they willing to compromise on? What are they willing to give up? Are they willing to give up the territory that's been taken from them already, including Crimea, including the Donbass and Donetsk region, everything over there on the east side of Ukraine that's been annexed by Russia? So, what are they going to be willing to negotiate? Okay, he's basically saying Ukraine may have to come to the negotiating table, which is huge because during the last 2 years of this war, it's always been no, we need to put the pressure on Russia. We need to prove to Russia that they cannot just invade another country and take territory away or do whatever they want. We need to put a stop to them, eliminate their military and do whatever we can to support Ukraine, give them weapons and allow them to keep fighting to defend their country. But yet now we're starting to see a complete 180. So I'll have an article to go over with you. I also have a video to show you as well of him talking about this kind of stuff. But first, I kind of want to show you this again. If you weren't able to see that video that I did on Ukraine the other day, I want to discuss this again real quick. So this is from Nexta. NATO is discussing the possibility of admitting Ukraine to the alliance in exchange for a cession of territories to Russia, which was on La Repubblica, which is a news outlet. And it says here, although this option is not an official position, it is being discussed informally and is becoming increasingly realistic, especially in light of the upcoming U.S. elections. As the newspaper points out, Russia will be offered to retain Crimea and all the territories that were captured over the past 2 years. Then the borders will be fixed and Ukraine will be accepted into NATO. This scenario, according to journalists, is reminiscent of the situation after World War II, when Germany was divided into eastern and western parts. The article indicates that such a scenario would speed up the release of aid to Kiev, which is currently blocked in Congress, especially in anticipation of Trump's possible return to the White House. So, what's going to happen here in Ukraine? Okay, what's going to happen here? Because we obviously have a lot of things that are going to be changing this year. There's a potential of Trump coming to the White House, as it says here. There's a potential of Ukraine not getting aid soon enough where they may literally have to surrender at some point if they cannot continue to fight this battle if they run out of supplies. We do know that Ukraine is really low on supplies right now. So this article here was talking about the fact that Ukraine may need to be willing to cede some territory to Russia, give this territory over to them and stop fighting for it, and basically call a truce here and come to the negotiating table so that way Ukraine can remain a free and sovereign nation away from Russia not being taken over, assuming that that's what Russia would be willing to do. Would Vladimir Putin want to do that? I have no idea, because it seems to me like he wants to either destroy Ukraine or take it over, based on his actions that he's done in Ukraine. But that's just my opinion. So we do also know that Ukraine is potentially going to become a NATO member here pretty soon. I just did a video yesterday of Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, at the NATO Minister of Foreign Affairs meeting in Brussels just the other day. And during this meeting, he stated that Ukraine will become a member of NATO. Okay, so we'll have to see how that goes, but according to what I'm seeing here, there's a potential that Ukraine may have to do some sort of surrender deal, or either whether or not surrender, maybe come to the negotiating table with Putin, which I just don't see Ukraine being willing to do that either. Zelensky doesn't really want to negotiate with him either. He calls him a terrorist and Russia terrorist and all kinds of names, and they obviously don't like each other. But I just don't I don't see a lot of these things playing out the way that that information reads. But I don't know. Let me know what you think down below. But I wanted to show you this here too. This is on Pravda. It says NATO Secretary General says Ukraine will have to decide which compromises it will accept in a war with Russia. It says here, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has said that Ukraine will have to decide which compromises it is ready to accept in the war with the Russian Federation. Jens Stoltenberg said in an interview with BBC to be broadcast on Sunday, April 7th, as reported by European Pravda. Although Stoltenberg said the military support is critically important, to enable Ukraine to repel Russian forces and force Russian leader Vladimir Putin to give up his goals of occupation, he suggested that Ukraine might also have to make concessions. So they might have to be willing to give up some of this territory, maybe, or what types of concessions would that be? I'm not really sure, other than giving up territory. At the end of the day, it has to be Ukraine that decides what kind of compromises they're willing to do. We need to enable them to be in a position where they actually achieve an acceptable result around the negotiating table. So again, they're going to have to come to the negotiating table with Russia in order to achieve this. He said he was not calling for Ukraine to offer concessions now, and added that real peace would be achievable when Ukraine prevails. So he obviously wants Ukraine to win, but I think what this is NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg is realizing that there's a possibility that Ukraine could lose this war. And this just came out, I think it was in December of last year. He also came out and was warning that we could have bad news coming from Ukraine. And what would that bad news be? Well, most likely that they're either losing the war or going to lose the war. So Stoltenberg also said that there is an authoritarian alliance between the Russian Federation, China, Iran, and North Korea, with each country giving practical support to the others and allow for growing more and more aligned. China's propping up the Russian war economy, delivering key parts to the defense industry, and in return, Moscow is mortgaging its future to Beijing, Stoltenberg said. On April 4th, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said he believes that there are two scenarios for how combat action in Ukraine could unfold depending on whether the NATO allies are able to unite to help Kyiv. One is that NATO allies are able to mobilize more support and that Ukraine is able to regain more territory. Or the other scenario is that we are not able to do so, and there is a real threat that Russia will capture even more territories, and we will be in an even more dangerous position. So those are the two scenarios that he sees here. He either sees that the West steps up, gives Ukraine the weapons they need, they fight back, take back the territory that they've lost, or maybe at least some of it. Or the other scenario is that they won't be able to give the supplies that they need to Ukraine, and Ukraine will basically continue to lose this war and lose more and more territory. And maybe that's where Ukraine will have to come to the negotiating table if they literally can't hold the front line. That's kind of how I interpret that. Let me know how you interpret it down below that, but that's how I see what he's talking about here. However, intelligence data obtained by NATO cast doubt on the ability of Russian forces to launch a large-scale offensive anytime soon. So he doesn't think that Russia will launch a large-scale offensive, but there's lots of reports coming out saying that Russia may launch an offensive as soon as summer. Okay, so yeah, this is going to get very interesting in Ukraine, and it's weird because all these wars that are happening, like even with what's going on with Israel and these Iranian-backed proxies, there's definitely an inflection point happening here with many of these wars that are going on, and they're all about to just completely do a 180, and they could either go one way or the other, and that's kind of what we're seeing here with Ukraine. is this could really go either way. No one really knows which way this is going to go. Is Ukraine going to get the support they need to continue fighting here? Do they even have the manpower? Do they have the willpower to continue fighting after 2 years? I think they do. But in terms of manpower, we've got lots of word coming out that they're having to conscript more people, lower the conscription age by 2 years to I think 25 when it was normally at 27. So there's lots of big signs coming out of Ukraine that they're definitely backpedaling here and they're struggling to continue fighting this war, especially when they don't have the support from the West, especially the United States that's supposed to be giving them aid right now. So I have a video here that I want to show you too. We're going to go over this. This is just a quick clip from Jens Stoltenberg during this interview, and I want you to hear it directly from his mouth, what he has to say. So let's take a look.
So most wars ends at the negotiating table, but what we know is that what happens around the negotiating table is very closely linked to the situation on the battlefield. So now Russia believes they can achieve their goals on the battlefield by continuing to push militarily against Ukraine. So the way to convince Russia that they have to sit down and accept a solution where Ukraine prevails as a sovereign, independent, democratic nation in Europe is to give military support to Ukraine. Then, of course, at the end of the day, it has to be Ukraine that decides what kind of compromises they're willing to do. We need to enable them to be in a position where they can actually achieve an acceptable result around the negotiating table.
Okay, so it seems to me, based on what we're hearing here, and I've seen multiple other sources talking about this, that it seems like there's a shift in the way that NATO wants to handle this war, and I think they're really starting to understand here that Ukraine really could lose this. Okay, and obviously the like European countries, especially NATO members that are supporting this war in Ukraine, they can't do this completely on their own. They need the United States backing, especially with the Federal Reserve could just print up a numerous amounts of money to give to Ukraine just in a blink of an eye. So it's hard for Europe to be able to do that. And I think they're just really starting to realize here that there's a very big possibility that Ukraine could lose this or begin to start losing it rapidly, to the point where if NATO does not decide to step into Ukraine and help them fight directly, then Ukraine is going to have to come to the negotiating table and basically try to come up with some sort of agreement with Russia. Otherwise, they could be completely taken over by Russia, and I don't think they'd want that. So I don't know. This is going to get very, very interesting as time goes on, and we'll have to see how this plays out. But it's not looking good for Ukraine, especially the longer that time goes that they're not getting the aid that they need. We do know that the aid package from the United States is going to be delayed up to a couple more weeks, maybe further, maybe till the end of the month, or who knows, maybe they'll never get it. At this point, it's been held up quite long enough that there's a potential here that it may not even get passed at all. But I think it will. It just may come too late, and we'll have to see. But let me know what you think down below. That's going to be it for this update. If you got something out of this update, please smash that like button. And also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below and hit the notification bell. That way YouTube can notify you. And with that, I hope y'all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless, and we'll see you in the next one.